Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Blood Red podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Pinnock, today, and I'm joined by Amy and Lauren from the RMTV Women's podcast to discuss Liverpool Women because something quite exciting happened on Sunday and they beat Bristol City 4-2 to win the Women's Championship and get promoted back into the WSL. So that's brilliant. And Amy, it's been a couple of days now. You've had a chance to sort of let us sink in, but both of you have covered the team quite closely over the last few years, and in a way, you've sort of been on this journey with them. So now you've had a couple of days. How are you feeling about promotion now and winning the title?
Ecstatic, and I feel like I'll probably be ecstatic for the rest of my life. It's been surreal. We did a podcast earlier, and we were saying that it feels like it's been so long overdue. Obviously, the fact that we didn't get promoted last season when our aim was to go up the first time asking. So I guess although it was painful at the time, it seems even sweeter now because we've had to wait so long for it. And the team has been through some really, really tough times over the last couple of seasons. And obviously covering that hasn't always been nice and rosy and fun. But I feel like when you support a team, you support them through the good times, but more importantly through the bad times as well. So I feel like we've definitely done that. We've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about how to sort of manage when we do lose and what content we put out, all that sort of thing. But it's an ecstatic feeling to win the league. I mean, Liverpool belong in the WSL, and to do it in the way we do, in the way we've done, with 2 games left to go, I don't really feel like you could ask for much more from this team, to be honest. It's an unbelievable run, especially this season. And now I just can't wait for the WSL. I think it's just going to be super exciting.
And Lauren, I sort of want to rewind now a couple of years back to the 2019-20 season, obviously the heartbreak of getting relegated and the manner in which it happened as well, because obviously everything was stopped because of the pandemic. And while the men's team could carry on and go on and win the Premier League, which is incredible for the club, but the women's team weren't able to do that and play themselves out of a relegation fight, and the league was decided on a points per game basis, and ultimately they did get relegated. But for you, what do you think was wrong with the club at the time, and how they sort of, because not even, well, about 10 years ago, really, they were winning back-to-back league titles, and now they've sort of struggled. What do you think allowed the club to fall away from teams like Manchester City and Chelsea, and what do you think went wrong that season that meant that they were in the position that they found themselves in?
I think it's difficult to kind of pinpoint an exact reason. I think we've spoken about this on our podcast before about, we couldn't quite keep up with Man City, Chelsea, Arsenal. They were pumping a lot of money into their women's side, and I don't think Liverpool could quite keep up with that at the time. So I think that's kind of where we started to fall away a little bit. As them teams were sort of getting bigger and bigger, ours was kind of just staying how it was, and you started losing quite key players to those teams, or they were going abroad to play somewhere else. So once you start losing key players like that, that's when you could kind of see the difference in how the team and how it was going and stuff. And then obviously we've had a couple of managers over the seasons. No one was really being able to implement their style on this team for a while now, and I think having Matt come in the summer, he can now do that. He's been able to do that this season, and he can move forward with that plan now with the club. And I do think the club's in quite a good place at the minute, which is really nice to see. They've got good support in the background, and they've got the team at the minute, and that they're only going to get better. So yeah, it was quite a bittersweet feeling when, like you said there, the men being able to go on and win the league that season, us getting relegated in the way in which we did, because we were kind of really coming into our own at that point in the season. We were having a really good run of form. Although we weren't winning games, we kind of looked like we might have been able to just nick it at the end to stay up, which makes it really frustrating for us thinking back on it now. But yeah, there's no point in dwelling on it now. It is what it is. But yeah, we're back there now, which is the most important thing.
Absolutely. And Amy, obviously the team weren't able to come straight back up, which probably would have, and you sort of alluded to it, there was probably that expectation that Liverpool would go down and come straight back up. But that wasn't the case. And I think Matt put it quite well in his post-match interview on Sunday, that no one has a divine right to be there and you've got to earn your right to be there, which they've certainly done this season. But what do you think's, obviously they went through changes and they parted ways with Vicky midway through last year as well, but what sort of went wrong last season that meant that, was it just that teams were better than them, or do you think that they hadn't quite found their stride at that point? And heading into this season, was it promotion or nothing? Was it anything but promotion going to be a big disappointment for Liverpool, given the recruitment that they've done and bringing Matt in and the changes that they've made as well?
100%. I think the last season was really tough, obviously both on and off the pitch. I think it's hard to pinpoint one exact thing that could be given to the cause of why we weren't able to clinch promotion last season. I think there were a lot of things off the pitch that caused just so much disruption throughout the team. Obviously, you had Vicky go, you had the process of an interim manager coming in, you didn't know who was going to be replaced as a permanent manager. And obviously, within that, you're going to have players that are going to be unsettled by it. So it's very hard then to go and ask a team to go out and perform at 100% of their ability week in, week out, when there's all that going on behind the scenes. Like we say it all the time now, football isn't just physical, it's mental as well. And if you're mentally switched on, you play better. So I think there was a lot of things like going on in the background off the pitch that could have affected all of the players. And I think another element was the teams in the league at that point were really good. The championship has come leaps and bounds over the last couple of seasons, and in fair play to Leicester, they probably did, over us, deserved to get promoted last season. Although they've struggled a bit in the WSL this year. Last season, I think they got the better of us on most of the games that we played against them. So I think that also comes into play. I think what's changed this season is Matt's come in and he's just completely steadied the ship. I think everyone had a very clear idea of what Matt was here to do, first of all, what the 1 year plan is, but then what the 5 year plan is, what the 10-year plan is. And I think everyone just seemed so much more cohesive this season in working towards getting promotion. And you're probably right. I don't think Liverpool could have afforded to have another season in the Championship. I think this was the season to do it. And obviously Matt recruited well, brought in Kiernan, who scored so many goals for us this season and been a vital part of the fact that we were able to pull away so many points so early on. So I think everyone just seems to be that really, really tight-knit group, and that's what you need in a football team, to go out each week and put on the shirt, not just for the club, but for each other. And you can see that the celebrations on Sunday showed how close all those girls are to each other and to the fans as well. But yeah, it just felt right this season. It's like hard to explain the feeling, but I think every cog joined up perfectly, and it just proves that in the fact that we're now promoted and now champions.
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on that as well, Lauren. Obviously, we've talked about it there, about the changes that were made, particularly in the summer, by bringing Matt in. And I think the club recruited quite smartly as well by signing players like Jazz, like Yana and Carla, that have obviously played with under Matt at Bristol City, which I think maybe that sort of recruitment helps, because you're signing players that understand the manager, know how he works, know what he expects from you and everything like that. But what's been the key factor for you this season that has allowed Liverpool to go on this incredible unbeaten run in the league? And I think they've scored the most in the league this season, but also conceded the least as well. So they've just been exceptional on all counts, really. So what's been the key thing for you this year that has really allowed them to push on?
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar to what Amy's saying in terms of recruitment. Obviously, you mentioned there that we didn't concede much this season, and that's down to Rachel Laws. I mean, we obviously had Riley in goal earlier on in the season. Obviously, her injury was just one of those freak accidents that you just never expect, and so that was really unfortunate for her, because she was going through a really good spell in goal. But yeah, Rachel Laws this season has been unbelievable. You know, the amount of clean sheets that she's got, just the consistency of her has been really key to us, you know, clinching promotion when we have. And the same as what Amy said, the mentality of the players has been absolutely amazing this season. You know, we touched on it with them all being a really good friends, aren't both on and off the pitch, and that really contributes to it as well. Because if you work well together, everything's going to click on the pitch as well. So yeah, it's definitely, I think definitely the mentality of the squad this season's a lot different, and you can sense that, even not, you know, not being around them on a daily basis, you can sense that on the pitch and off the pitch, that the team is just in a really good moment right now, and has been all season. So I think that's just kind of been just the little difference in last year's team compared to this year. It's just the mentality of the squad, and they all just want to play for each other and for the club. It's not about anything else other than just wanting to achieve what they have achieved this season. And yeah, I think with that being the goal since day one, it's kind of helped them to sort of get to that point now, which is really nice.
Definitely, and Amy, this summer's going to be quite a big one for the team. Of course, you know, they've probably got a lot to think about recruitment wise, and I did pick up on it when Matt was talking on Sunday, and he sort of said about how there will be changes in the summer. And feel free to tell me to shut up if I'm stupid for being a little bit worried, but the thing that I was sort of worried about from that was if there's too many changes in terms of players moving on and players coming in. I think we've seen it quite a bit with the women's team in the past, where so many players would move on, and I think that tends to happen with the women's game in general, partly because of player contracts tends to be a little bit shorter than they are in the men's game. But certain summers, particularly, and this may have sort of contributed to why Liverpool have struggled over the years, is that so many players would move on, and they've signed so many players as well, which on the face of it looks good because you're signing players, you're building your squad, but I think it can quite easily move into quite dangerous territory of where you're potentially going to be in a bit of a relegation fight. You've got survival to think about. Maybe the last thing you need as well is to have to gel together loads of new players and effectively put together a new squad. So do you think that's something that Liverpool need to be careful with this summer, that they try and retain as many of the players in the squad at the moment as possible while making the key additions that they need, rather than a complete overhaul effectively?
Yeah, I think we've built a really, really strong foundation this season, especially. I think you can just see that in the pure fact that we've got the trophy and we're going up. I guess, yeah, you're right. I think on one side you could look at it, why would you ruin something that's clearly worked this season? But then on the other hand, it is a big step up from the Championship to the WSL. I think we've seen how much Leicester have struggled this season with keeping quite a lot of their players on, and obviously recruiting in as well. But I think when you look at our team and you look at who's in it, you see a lot of WSL experience anyways. You've got Mel Lawley in there, Meg Campbell, who joined in the summer. Fahi's played in that league before. Raza Roberts has played in the league before. So you'd like to think we have a good standard of experience within that top league as it is at the minute. I think there's always room to add a few more players. And I guess there's a conversation about some of them, whether they are at the standard that Liverpool Football Club needs them to be in order to keep us away from relegation next season. And of course, you don't ever want to see anyone go. I feel like the team is just great at the minute, and to lose anyone would sort of ruin the cohesion a little bit. But you do have to think, like, we don't want to be that team that goes up and comes straight back down again. And I think in that sense, Matt will be a little bit ruthless in shifting those that he doesn't think are at the level to compete next season. And it's always great to have new players come in. And we were talking on the weekend. I ain't got a clue who any of them are going to be that come in. It's going to be really, really tough. But yeah, as well, you look at it that we've got a really, really strong team at the minute, and you wouldn't want to lose what we have by having a massive overhaul, which you see happen time and time again. But only time will tell. But I'm sure we will lose some players, and hopefully we bring in some really great players as well to help us continue in the league.
Definitely. And Lauren, are there any players in the squad at the moment that you think we absolutely have to keep a hold of you whatever the cost, and as well as that, the sort of positions in the squad that you think we need a bit of extra depth there, and anywhere that you think we could do with a bit of extra quality?
I want to keep them all. I don't want anyone to go. Like Amy said, then it's a really good group at the minute, so it's kind of like you don't want anyone to leave. I think you can always benefit from someone who can score goals. Goals win your games. So, Amy touched on it earlier with Leanne Kane, the form that she's been in this season. We've obviously brought Katie Stengel in as well. I'm pretty sure her contract goes through till next season as well. So you're keeping them two up front, which is nice. But it'll never hurt to add another goal scorer to the team, I don't think. I think also maybe just a bit more depth in midfield is always nice. We've had a couple of injuries this season that have kind of affected our midfield, but I think we could really benefit from someone who can sort of do that holding midfield role. And I think as well, Carl Humphrey signed in the summer, but you haven't seen a lot of her this season. And I think she will be like a new sign in the summer for us in terms of just the way she plays. She is suited to a league like the WSL. That is where she will shine. She's that type of player that can sort of, she's in those little pockets and she can create something, and that's going to be key for us next season in terms of link up play and stuff. So there's a couple of people who you definitely need to keep on next year. And just anyone who's willing. We're now a team in the top division. We're going to be more. Players are going to look at us and think, I want to play for them. Liverpool Football Club in the Women's Super League is one of the biggest teams that you could play for. So we are going to look good to some players in the summer who are out of contract or maybe fancy a move. So yeah, I feel like the world's kind of your oyster in terms of who you want to go for, and Mac could probably have a pick of a few players who fancy the challenge with us next season.
For sure, and Amy, it's going to be quite an exciting season next year. Obviously, there's the Merseyside derby coming back, which will be exciting, and big games then with Chelsea, Man City, Arsenal. But obviously, I think we will be quite wary of what's happened to Villa and Leicester in the last couple of years, where they've come up and they've struggled. I mean, Villa have done quite a bit better this year, but their first season they were in a relegation fight and it went down to the final day. And Leicester, I think, are just fortunate that Birmingham City have probably just been that bit worse than them this year, that Birmingham City look like, unless there's anything drastic happens in the last few weeks of the season, that Birmingham will go down. So Leicester have been quite fortunate, and they've probably got a lot to think about next season. But is that something that Liverpool need to be wary of? Obviously, teams, it can probably be quite difficult for teams where you go from winning practically every week in the Championship to suddenly coming up against the likes of Chelsea, Arsenal, City. And what do you think will be important for Liverpool next year to make sure that they do maintain that top flight status, and like you said earlier, that they don't come straight back down?
It's going to be really tough, and I think we all know that. You only have to look at the cup game the other week against Arsenal at Prenton Park to see that we're up against some real opposition. No disrespect to the Championship teams that are half, but most of them gave us a really good go over the last season as well. But when you look at Chelsea, Arsenal, City, who all are sort of pushing for Champions League status, something that we've obviously not seen in quite a long time. They're some of the best teams in the world at the minute, playing some incredible football, have the biggest players, the stars in their teams. So I think it's going to be strange. I don't think Liverpool have been full flying in the WSL for quite a few seasons, probably since we lifted the trophy all that time ago. So I think just being wary, but also not letting heads drop if we do go a couple of games without picking up a point, or we do get a hefty scoreline defeat against one of the top sides. Because I think, although it pains me to say it, we're going to at least be destroyed by a couple of teams, I think, at one point during the season. As much as I hate saying it, it's the reality. But again, just not pointing the blame, not letting heads drop, just continuing on with our season and picking the games where you can pick up a point, you can pick up 3 points. Just pinpointed throughout the season the main targets to get those points, I think is going to be essential. But I think it all depends on our recruitment, as we've already spoken about in the summer, who we bring in, who we keep. But it is going to be exciting. And the Merseyside derby, I can't wait for. It's going to be unreal.
Definitely, that's one that I'm looking forward to as well. But Lauren, for me, I think having Matt in charge, I think gives me quite a bit of confidence. I think maybe with Villa and Leicester in particular coming up, they've probably had quite inexperienced managers. Obviously, they've kept their managers from the Championship. And obviously Villa in their first season had to bring in an interim halfway through the season in order to help them stay up. And obviously they brought in Carla Ward this year, and I think that's helped them massively. So do you think having such an experienced manager in Matt to sort of guide us through the first season in the WSL, do you think that will be quite crucial for Liverpool, and that might give them a bit of a boost compared to maybe what Leicester and Villa had when they got promoted?
Yeah, definitely. I think, having Matt there, like you said, he's a very experienced manager. He's been about in a couple of teams now across the league, so he knows what he's doing in the job. There's no doubt that there was questions in the summer from both myself and Amy as well. We did say, is he the right person to sort of take us where we want to go? But he 100% is. When you speak to him, he's nothing but professional. And that's what you need. You need someone who's got the head screwed on in this league, and he definitely does have that. So yeah, he'll already have a plan in his head about what he's thinking about for the season, and it's a marathon, not a sprint for me. So you can't be disappointed next year, like Amy said, if there's a couple of games where you don't have the best game, or you don't have a good run of form. It's a tough league, it's a difficult league, and we're not going to go straight back into the WSL and be flying in the top 3, top 4. It's about just keeping our heads level and just getting by for probably the next 2 seasons. You look at it as a 5-year plan rather than a 2-year plan, and I think as long as we can keep some consistency in managers and backroom staff and the squad as well, like you said, if you're chopping and changing the squad, it might not help. So I think just having that bit of consistency and Matt leading the way, I don't think we can see many issues ahead of us in the season coming.
Yeah, and Amy, Matt spoke about, the 4-5-year plan that's sort of in place, and obviously promotion was probably the first step in that. And that's probably largely down to the extra support and more support that they're probably getting higher up at the club as well, which maybe they didn't have previously. But what do you think, or what would you like to see more from the club moving forward in terms of the support that's given to the women's team? I think the training ground's quite a big one. I'm not too sure what, because obviously they've got the contract with Tranmere. I'm not sure if you guys are more clued up on when that sort of expires, and obviously the club are exploring their options in terms of when that's up and where they might move to. And I know they've trained at the AXA a couple of times this season, but is that something you'd like to see more on a more permanent basis moving forward? And is that support from the club moving forward in terms not just financially, but in terms of, and the fact that Jurgen was speaking about the women's team and the messages from Trent, is having that support from the men's side so important moving forward? And in terms of that 4-5-year plan, what will be key for, because obviously they're going to be targeting, eventually, it will take time, but they're going to be targeting the title, they're going to be targeting Champions League, but obviously that will come with time. But what for you would you like to see from the club in the next few years, really, in terms of support?
I think it's tough, really. I think the training ground's always going to be a conversation until it either happens or we're presented with an alternative permanent home, whether that's our own training ground or moving elsewhere. I think it's always going to be a talking point. I love the fact that Jurgen spoke about the team, that Trent sending the message. I think we've tried as a club to do that one team mentality. I don't think we've quite got it as much as City have at the minute. I think they're paving the way in that. They were the first to do it, and they've come really, really far with that. But I think we're putting in steps to try and get to that, and I think it's just so essential. If the women can look to the men, if the men can look to the women, and it's really cohesive, think how much they can learn from each other. Like the men has been professional for so many more years. The women's only been professional for 10 or 11 years now in the WSL. The women can learn so much from the men, and in hand that will make the team stronger, more knowledgeable, to allow you to go and then compete for titles and stuff. But I think the club, even from when me and Lauren have been covering it over the last few years, there has been so much more effort put in, especially this season. Like we had that fan park before the Durham game, where John Barnes came, Farrah Williams came down. There was a nice little me and Lauren tried the miles per hour penalty kick. It was awful. Just things like that, getting people involved, no matter what age, where you're traveling from, all that kind of thing. So there's a massive push in the right direction. I think there's a long way to go. Don't get me wrong. This is the first season where they've really tried it. A long way to go, but I think the way is just bringing the teams together, really making that we are one team, a real ethos throughout the whole of the club. And hopefully we'll start to see that over the next few seasons. But I think as well, getting a permanent home, that's a big one. Tranmere is great. I'm not too sure how long we have left, and I think we're definitely there next season. But we need our own home. We need to be in red. Those blue chairs don't do it for me. We need to be in red. But even if we did something like Everton have done, they've got their own home in Walton Hall Park, and train with the lads at Finch Farm. So if are we looking at that kind of model? I don't know. It would be great, but yeah, I think that's probably one of the main things to look at. But there's time for it, isn't there? There's more that can be done, and hopefully we'll start to see that.
Absolutely, and of course, making sure they stay up next season is the first step to that, I think. But in terms of the women's game in general, Lauren, it is quite an exciting time. Obviously, watching the Champions League in the last few weeks and Barcelona selling out the Camp Nou again. Obviously, just watching the scenes, like I watched the game when they played Real Madrid in their quarterfinals, and just the atmosphere and watching the women's game at the Camp Nou is quite surreal, and it's just the interest in it and the fact that they've sold it out again, and we're seeing it quite a lot now in the women's game. And even the attendance at Ashton Gate on Sunday, it was over the 5,000 mark, and it was a record in the championship, which was brilliant. So obviously, in terms of covering the women's game the last few years, like how happy does it make you to see that we're starting to reach a stage where it's just coming on leaps and bounds, and record after record is just being broken, and the interest in it is clearly, growing as well.
Yeah, it's huge. It's grown quite quickly. I think it's gone at a much faster pace than a lot of people expected. But it just shows that that there's a market there for it. You've really got to look at the women's Euros this summer as well. Tickets selling out for that within an hour. There's people there who want to watch women's football and who want to support it, and you've got to just keep pushing it for that. You look at what the Scotland women's team have done over on social media the last couple of days with the issues with their games and stuff in terms of tickets being available. Like you're saying there, the Camp Nou sold out, over 90,000 people going there for the second time. The women's Euros are selling out. There's a market there for it, and people have got to realise that now, and governing bodies have got to realise that now, that it's not the fans, it's them that need to give the opportunities to people, because the teams are there for it, the players are there for it, and the fans are there for it. So it's just about pushing that now, and I think the women's Euros this summer will be a huge one, especially with it being a home Euros in the UK is going to be massive. So yeah, it's just a really exciting time, and you just feel like there's constantly another record being broken, something else to speak about in the game that's just bringing so much more positive light on the women's side. So yeah, it's a really exciting time to be a women's football fan, and I'm just glad that, you know, Liverpool itself now can get back in the top league and sort of get on board with all that. Now, we spoke about in our podcast earlier on about you know, games being easier to watch, you know, especially for the away ones that you can't attend. You know, we struggled so much this season not being able to watch games at all. So to have, you know, that accessibility as well is huge. So yeah, it's just there's constantly something improving in the women's game, and I think especially after the summer and going over the next 2-3 years, there's going to just be even more that's gonna get better for it.
Definitely, and Amy as well. We haven't even touched on the increasing coverage of the women's game as well. Obviously, I just realised as Laura mentioned it there that a fair few of the Liverpool women's games are going to be shown on Sky Sports now. Obviously, with the WSL being shown on there as well. So, what have you sort of made in the last few years of the increasing coverage from a media perspective? And obviously, I sort of want to ask as well, because your fan channel is quite important, I think, as well, in terms of growing the women's game, obviously associated with the RMTV as well, but in terms of fans having a place that they can go to get that coverage that maybe isn't on the TV and things like that. So what have you made of the coverage in the last few years, and as well your contributions to it?
The coverage is incredible. I think we've called out for years to have the access, and now we have the access. It's, the knock-on effect is that people are beginning to watch it, and that's all you can ever ask for. It's from past experience. When we first started doing this podcast, none of the games were ever showed, so you either go to the game or you don't see it, or you see highlights 4 days after, so it was almost impossible. I just remember sometimes we sit down and we do a podcast and we're like, we haven't even seen the game. It's ridiculous because you just didn't get that access. But you see it on Sky Sports, you see it on BBC. You can literally just turn on your telly and it comes on. It's so easy now, and it just opens up that whole new network of people to get involved and to watch it. And it only takes 5 minutes of your time to turn on your telly and go, oh, I'm actually getting into this. If you've not seen it before, it's just a game of football, isn't it? So it's super easy. And in terms of our channel, God, we're going into our 5th season next season, which is absolutely baffles my head each time. Each time it comes around to our whatever anniversary it is, well, God, we've got to make content for that, because we always forget. But it's gone so fast, and I think at the start, because people didn't have that access, I think we felt like we were quite important and kind of had a service for people. And ever since then, we've just kind of created this community where they can tweet us any thoughts about the game. They can ask us questions before the game, what time's kickoff, even something as simple as that. Or in our YouTube comments, they look on and they agree with what they're saying. They challenge what we're saying, which is a really important part of it as well, because not everything me and Laurence say is everyone's cup of tea. So it's nice to sort of be challenged on it, and I hope people enjoy it, because we both love doing it, and I think when you've been doing it for this long, it's almost like your second job. It's crazy that we do it. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of time, and sometimes life does get in the way, but I don't think either of us would ever change it. And it just makes moments like last weekend even better, because we can go on and share it with the rest of the community, which is, yeah, it's no better feeling, really. And I hope next season, as we go up, we'll get a few more people involved. We'll grow the community even bigger. So that's the goal, I think.
For sure. And just to end on, I do want to talk a little bit about the Euros this summer, because I'm quite excited. I've got my tickets for the final. I've got my tickets for the opening game at Old Trafford, although I'm not quite keen on it being at Old Trafford, to be honest, as a Liverpool fan. But I'm really excited for the Euros this summer. I mean, usually I'm not too interested in the national team, particularly on the men's side of it. But for the women's team, like, I was devastated when they got knocked out of the World Cup a few years ago, and I've been really excited for the Euros. Obviously, it feels like it's been a long time coming because it got delayed. And I remember going to a media event a couple of years ago, before the pandemic, and it was marking 500 days until the Women's Euros when it was supposed to take place. And obviously, it's been pushed back now. And now it's finally here, and it's a home Euros, and I think it's an exciting England squad at the moment as well. And I sort of wanted to get your thoughts on the Euros, Lauren, and how excited you are for the tournament, and just how far you think England can go, and what that will do for the women's game, particularly in this country, if England have a successful summer.
Yeah, it'll be huge. I mean, you looked at the buzz around the 2019 World Cup, and we won't get into the semi-final of that. The buzz it created around the country and whatnot. You'd love to see the beer gardens full like they were for the men's Euros, and how that reacted. That would be amazing. But yeah, just like I said earlier, the ticket selling out, that's just a huge positive in itself. For me, it was getting to any game I could get tickets for. Really, it wasn't just about England women; it was about experiencing every country this summer. Getting to know new players. You've seen loads of teams come on leaps and bounds, especially the likes of Spain and stuff over the last couple of years, which makes it even more exciting. It's exciting because the USA on in it, so everyone's not just focused on them, and they've always been the one team that everyone's just like, well, they're going to win it anyway. So, but yeah, I do fancy England's chances. I think we will have a good tournament. Obviously, it's interesting to see what kind of squads is going to be picked, but I think anyone that goes is always going to give 100%. And obviously, with the new manager coming in as well, she's obviously won this competition previously with the Netherlands. So. Yeah, it puts us in a good position. So yeah, it's just really exciting. It's nice. It's like you touched on earlier. And I'm not one for international football either, but when these big tournaments do come around, you do get that buzz and that excitement for it. So yeah, it should be a good tournament. Yeah.
And who are your favourites, Amy? Obviously, the obvious answer is England, but what other teams would you be looking out for this summer?
I love the Netherlands. I feel like I know quite a lot of the players that play in that team. I just love Miedema as a player. I think she's incredible. As well as like Van der Donk or all of them who've been in the WSL before that you've been able to follow quite closely. I think they're quite an exciting team. But yeah, I think, to be honest, I am just looking forward to seeing England. I know it's a little bit cliche, but it feels like they're going to use that hurt and that negativity that came from the World Cup falling short of a medal, and bring it into a competition where they've got a coach who's won it previously. They've got a really strong squad that's full of youth and experience. And obviously, you've almost got a new captain. Leah Williamson's not ever captained a huge major tournament before, so I think she's going to take that and grab it by the horns, really, and really run with it. But yeah, it's super exciting, and as Laurence said, I'd love everyone to get behind it. And seeing the beer flying everywhere, that would be really, really great. I feel like it's gonna fly by, so everyone needs to sort of enjoy it while we can.
Definitely, and that's all we've got time for today. I want to thank you both for joining me to talk about Liverpool Women, and hopefully it'll be another exciting season next year as well. And hopefully, if you join up again, it'll be positive things to talk about. But thanks again, and yeah, we look forward to seeing you next season.